So when you first hear the word border, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Caravan of immigrants migrating north, maybe? An entry point for asylum seekers fleeing their home countries due to the atrocities of war or poverty? Maybe you relate it to an epicenter of hostility, brutality, and struggle, or just an imaginary line or a physical barrier that passes through mountains, hills, sand dunes, canals, rivers, cacti fields, cities, and oceans. But I mean, no matter how we look at it, there's no question that this topic of borders has engulfed American politics, right? And has led to some really deep divisions in our country. But in reality, these borders are so much more than places of conflict. They're also intersections of rich culture, exchange of ideas, hubs for trade and commerce, and sometimes even places of natural beauty. In fact, the Milky Way galaxy is visible at the US-Mexico border just a few hours south of here. The clear night sky on a new moon night with billions of stars reminds us that we really are just this tiny speck in the universe. Punches home the simple truth that we're a meaningful human race. We're a single human race with a meaningful purpose of existence. Now, what drives people to undertake the dangerous journey to cross any border? What is it to be a refugee? What does the border really look like? And why do we remain so divided on this topic of border security and immigration? I had so many more questions than answers, which is what led me to embark on this journey along the US-Mexico border, exploring the culture and documenting the raw, often unseen realities of this 1,900-mile-long border. Along this voyage of exploration, I met some truly extraordinary people, each of whom touched my life uniquely and profoundly through their stories. Now, I visited borders all over the world, right? So these questions led me to 6 borders across 5 continents. That's where I heard all of these stories and met all of these incredible people that each changed my life uniquely. I met a German couple who were photographing Syria from the Israeli side of their border so that their adopted Syrian refugee son could see his home country in pictures as he grew up. A student who drives 2 hours every single morning just to get to school. A convicted felon in Colombia who served his sentence and is now a strong advocate for education and works hard every single day to lift his small town out of poverty. A Palestinian teen who holds a camera for the first time and can't stop looking through the pictures of his country that I took earlier that day. Finally, a Border Patrol agent who told me no citizen had ever stopped by to say hello to him once in the last 20 years, given the hardly habitable terrain conditions that he's forced to work in every single day. In fact, most Border Patrol agents don't know where they'll be stationed until the day of duty. They spend long hours in their vehicles patrolling in even the most hazardous conditions, or walking miles in the treacherous cacti fields, but always working under this extreme pressure. Some surveillance areas of theirs are so remote that the days of isolation take a strong psychological toll on these agents. It's a job for which one has to be on constant alert and prepared for anything, whether that means saving a drowning immigrant or stumbling across a dead body in the middle of the night. Dealing with drug cartels, sex traffickers, and sometimes even armed militia is really no easy task. One agent who I talked to told me that although it's his duty to apprehend anyone crossing the border illegally, his first action is always to offer water to the thirsty immigrant, even as he handcuffs them. All this to say that at the end of the day, Border Patrol agents are human beings too, and we should be grateful for their service. Part of truly understanding these borders entails trying to gain insight into the lives of the people who cross the border for a better living. Along my journey, I met immigrants who painstakingly harvest cotton fields, pull weeds from pesticide-ridden farms, process construction materials with their bare hands, and toil away in the desert heat. Many walk or bike hours every day to get to their place of work in the US, and that's completely not to mention the long immigration lines that they have to endure. I met one immigrant who couldn't stop voicing her bewilderment at the level of discrimination that she's felt in the past just because of her ethnicity. It hurts her even more because, unbeknownst to the outside world, her brother died in a shrapnel explosion while serving in the US Army in the Middle East. She later shared with me some pictures of her late brother and of the American flag that adorned his casket at his funeral. Her story reminds me and reminds us of why empathy is so crucial, right? I mean, now more than ever. The joint security area seen here in Panmunjom is the only place inside the demilitarized zone where North and South Korea conduct their official meetings. These blue houses sit right on the border between the two countries, inside the DMZ, which is widely considered to be one of the most secure borders of the world, given the vast military presence. Migration across this border is both rare and extremely dangerous, but nonetheless, some North Korean soldiers have attempted to defect to the south, navigating through barbed wire fences, evading human traps and landmines, and avoiding the electric shock from fences. The DMZ has state-of-the-art security on both sides of the border, like thermal imaging technology, night vision technology, sensors, and on the South Korean side of the border, military outposts every 100 meters inside the DMZ. The roads leading up to and inside the DMZ are often lined with these things called anti-tank walls, which are rigged with dynamite and designed to explode and topple onto the road in the case of an oncoming North Korean invasion. All of this essentially ensures that the Korean DMZ is a border like no other, especially given the constant threat of the eruption of a nuclear world war. In stark contrast to the heavily fortified Korean DMZ, the border between Colombia and Peru is largely unguarded and rich in nature. Meet the villagers who reside along the banks of this Amazon River border. The only means of transport to the villages at the banks of the river is by boat. And in the evenings, the villagers gather on a small island in between the two countries for bouts of wrestling and swimming. In fact, as the sun set over the Amazon one evening, my sister and I actually had the opportunity to join them on the island for a really fun game of soccer. Kids there don't own iPhones or play video games. Instead, they swim with the dolphins in the Amazon and they play in the mud. Their lifestyle really made me rethink my own luxuries. Now, the country of Israel undoubtedly has some of the richest cultures and traditions of the world. It's also a place of severe ethnic and religious conflict. Israel shares borders with Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, Jordan, Egypt, and Gaza. Israel's border with Lebanon is incredibly scenic towards the west, with a barrier constructed towards the east. Now, border crossings at this location are completely one-directional, as Israel considers Lebanon an enemy of state, given the continued active presence of Hezbollah in many of the border towns there. When I asked one resident about the barrier and about Hezbollah, he told me, you can't dig underground tunnels, you can't recruit young suicide bombers, and then expect that the borders remain open. The barrier between Israel and Palestine is the tallest cemented border structure that I've seen to date. One Palestinian family inside Palestine was especially kind to host us for an afternoon of lunch after a long morning of photographing the neighborhood. A hired household helper there told me about her nephew, who was rounded up by the Israeli government during a peaceful protest and whose whereabouts are now completely unknown. In Hebron, Palestine, Palestinians crossing from a Palestine-controlled sector of the city to an Israeli-controlled sector of the same city are subjected to mandatory body inspections. And later that day, an Israeli soldier told me why, as he pointed out the poster of a 10-year-old Israeli girl who was killed in a dance class just a few days earlier. I earned a deeper understanding into why the institution of peace in the Middle East has continued to remain so fruitless. I witnessed this vicious cycle of two wrongs not making a right. as the relationship between these two countries continued to sink further and further into despair. Now, drug trafficking is widely the most cited issue at borders all over the world. And residents and Border Patrol agents shared with me some of the creative ways that cartels use to smuggle drugs. For example, drugs can be stitched underneath someone's skin, or hidden in coconuts, coffee beans, or kidney beans. They sometimes use a chemical masking agent to completely disguise the appearance of cocaine. Cartels sometimes even use these sophisticated electric submersibles and makeshift planes to land the drugs. These planes land in any strip of open land, including farmland, and intentionally break down after a single use. Unfortunately, this problem of drug trafficking is a continually growing crisis, and one that will sadly but undoubtedly continue to plague us for some years to come. Finally, we've all heard from the media and politicians, but I got a very different and unique perspective from someone who endured the dangerous US-Mexico border journey herself. I'd like for you to meet an immigrant who crossed the border decades ago. According to her, while some flee their home countries due to these atrocities of war, poverty, many others are manipulated into undertaking the arduous journey north by cartels who only want to profit from their crossing. She believes that education is the solution to this problem, and that needs to start in countries far beyond our own borders. Inspired by my journey, she voluntarily gave us a 4-hour tour of her town until midnight, taking us to places that we wouldn't have otherwise dared to go. Along the way, she shared her story of how she crossed the border illegally at the time and struggled to make ends meet. She raised her son alone, who went on to serve in the US Army. She won my heart. Now, as I became more invested in my travels, I began to fear the unknown less and explore far beyond what I was originally comfortable with, leading me to people who taught me invaluable and life-changing lessons through their inspiring and heartbreaking stories that they shared with pride, tears, and passion. My experiences have cemented my belief that every perspective matters, every person is significant, and every story needs to be told. Most importantly, we need to give a voice to those who cannot speak up for themselves. We need to make ourselves a part of people's lives by understanding their experiences, understanding their hardships, their beliefs. People will confide in us, but we need to give them a reason to. People will trust us with their stories, but it's our duty to safeguard that trust by valuing their perspective. By engaging in our communities in this manner, we can understand and truly appreciate what we have while doing something noble for the greater good. And in today's world, more than ever, it's so important to bring communities together like this by emphasizing our shared humanity and the common values that bind us. But even through all this, the bigger question still persists, right? Why do we remain so divided? We know that the foundation of our democracy is the empowerment of the common man and woman to express themselves freely. But that being said, we need to be able to discern fiction from fact, logic, and reason, constructing educated and well-informed opinions based on those facts. That's how we maintain our society and not fall prey to our divisions. These divisions that are often amplified by uninformed and baseless assertions. We divide ourselves because we disagree on how the problem should be solved. And in the ensuing chaos and debate, a great many perspectives are lost. If considering every perspective is what's necessary to find common ground, then it's our duty to the world and every single one of its citizens to do so. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. So how can students do their part and help make a difference in the community? There's so many societal issues that the world faces today that divide us. For example, hunger and poverty, climate change, racial inequality. The list really is endless, right? So by using the resources at your disposal and your interdisciplinary talent, you can help bring underrepresented perspectives into the public sphere. Find your own unique way of facilitating positive change. The world really is full of possibilities, and you can make a powerful impact if you're able to connect passion with purpose. It was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. who said, "We may have all come on different ships. We're in the same boat now." Undoubtedly, we still have a long way to go to truly embody this as a society. It will take immeasurable courage to foster such a high level of empathy and inclusion. And that can only happen if we truly open our eyes to the world. Accepting the facts, understanding all perspectives, and most importantly, exemplifying a willingness to do what is right. Positive change will never come easy. But I know it's not impossible either. So no matter what tomorrow brings, or however hard or long the journey may seem, I'm optimistic that we can still strive to be the change that we want to see in the world. And at every step of this perpetual odyssey, the decisions that we make and the actions that we take will define the mark that we leave on this world and our legacy. Thank you.